Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Kara. I'm the Director of Education Content at Smore. I came to Smore from a long career in school buildings as a teacher and principal. I have a PhD in teaching and learning. I arrived at Smore about 20 seconds before the pandemic started. It's been a really wild ride for me at Smore, and I'm excited to share some of what I've learned and hear from you how I can support you in your school communications work. I know everyone is very busy. I appreciate that you've taken the time to join me today, and my goal is to give you concrete, actionable tips that you can implement immediately. These are the 5 areas that we'll cover today. So I want to start by sharing a little background on how I view school communications. The way I see it, school communications are really, at their base level, about building relationships. If you think about the expression keeping in touch, it's a very physical expression, right? And it's reciprocal. To stay in touch, 2 people have to be in relationship together. One person can't be in touch with someone alone. It's a 2-way street. So what we're talking about is staying in touch with parents and caregivers all year long and using updates as one vehicle for being in relationship with them. When times are tough, when even purchasing eggs is a hit on the family pocketbook, this is even more important. My beliefs are rooted in education research. If you take a minute and glance over the bullet points on this slide, amazingly, there's a single, simple, but powerful reason behind all of this improvement, and it's trust. The more home adults hear from their child's teacher and principal, the more they feel in the know about what's happening at school. The more parents feel involved in school life, the more they trust the adults in the building. And that's the key. The more home adults trust the school adults, the more they support their child's learning. And this is equally important for students from immigrant families as students whose parents attended the same school a generation back. The way I've come to think of it is that family communication is as integral to a child's learning and development as choice of curriculum and instructional methods. So with that foundation established, let's get into the specifics of what's helpful to communicate as we're all tightening our belts a little bit. We all know the hit attendance has taken since the start of the pandemic, with at-risk populations the most harmed by persistent or chronic absenteeism. And I wish that I had an easy fix to offer. I don't think there really is one. It's a complicated problem, but I do think that one approach to easing the problem is found in deliberate school communications. Now, especially in the elementary years, a great many of the absences that make up a chronically absent child is tied to health problems that persist in historically disadvantaged communities, like asthma, diabetes, dental and mental health issues. Other barriers might include lack of a nearby school bus or lack of a safe route to school or food insecurity. By 4th grade, there are already clear indicators of who is at risk to drop out of high school. So our work really has to start early. And digital, translatable weekly communications are a very powerful mode of outreach. However, sending updates is just the first step. The next step is to pay attention to who is opening and clicking, which home adults are engaging and which are not. And once you begin to see a pattern, you can work with the school counselor or the principal or classroom teacher, depending on your role, and start reaching out to disengaged families individually. And this is all the more powerful if those disengaged adults align with student absences. Now, I really cannot emphasize enough the power of a weekly classroom newsletter. As you know, it is really difficult, if not impossible, to reach out to every parent one-to-one each week. So a newsletter can serve as a proxy for a relationship. When teachers are sharing what's happening in their classroom at the same time every week, it begins to feel like a conversation. And then it comes back to trust. If home adults trust their child's teacher, what happens? They do a better job of supporting their child's learning. When parents and caregivers have ready access to what their child is learning, what the class expectations are, what the assignments are, when they're due, what support systems exist at school should their child be struggling, they are far better able to support their child's education. Just because a parent doesn't know doesn't mean they don't want to know. And in theory, most teachers truly believe that they're already communicating this information home. And on a certain level, they really are. But if the information isn't arriving in translatable, accessible formats, and if teachers aren't using their analytics data to make one-to-one connections with parents or caregivers who seem to have fallen off the grid, then it's not information that's reaching the people who most need it. And I don't have a slide that answers this question. I think that this is a question that's specific to every single school that has its own mission, but it's something that everyone should be thinking about. Now, multilingual parents and caregivers have different barriers to engagement. Their work schedules might not allow them to participate in the PTA or other volunteer activities. Transportation or childcare needs might make attending school functions challenging. And there are challenges that come with being an immigrant parent, struggling with the social and cultural mores, struggling with the language, being unfamiliar with the ins and outs of the US public school system. So a one-size-fits-all approach to school-home communication is not going to work for what is soon to be 25% of the school-age population. Studies show that families most at risk of food insecurity are often the least likely to fill out the forms they need for free and reduced lunch. Children living in poverty have the highest absenteeism and dropout rates. So arguably, engaging this group of parents and caregivers is our most important task, and that means removing every barrier we possibly can. Now, this is a list of programs and services to provide for families. It's possible that you don't have all these things in place for families, like counseling or mental health support. Given that inflation, rising food prices, food insecurity, and layoffs are hitting at-risk families the hardest, it might be worth considering if you have the resources to put something in place. If not, it's also enough to host events that connect families to the necessary resources and supports. As you already know, attendance is crucial both for the child and for the school. Connecting with families via whatever school communications tools you have at your disposal is essential, both for a child's future potential as well as for a school's bottom line. Now, I see school newsletters posted on Twitter all the time, so I know that schools are sharing these kinds of resources week in and week out. You're probably already sharing a number of these resources. I'm so glad to take suggestions of other kinds of resources that can be shared. Again, there has to be a combination of consistent outreach paired with data analysis and one-to-one outreach. One size fits all will not work, especially with outreach with at-risk students. Okay, so I talked a little bit about content, what we want to be communicating. Now I want to talk a little bit about best practices in school communications. So first up is the 4 C's. Number 1, communicate clearly. Use bullet points and lists. Make your updates skimmable. Cut down on long blocks of text. Remember that you are writing for the medium the size of someone's palm. When you send yourself a test email, read it on your hand. Sorry, don't read it on your hand, read it on your phone so that you can tell how readable it is. I see somebody has a hand up. And feel free to pop your question in the chat. And the next C that I wanted to address is consistency. Communicate consistently to alleviate uncertainty. Deliver at the same time every week so that parents and caregivers can rely on receiving the info so that they can even anticipate receiving it. And three, you want to encourage a sense of community, a sense of we are all in this together. We are here for you. And then lastly, you want to repeat the essential information over and over and over. Now, at the very beginning of this webinar, I spoke about the phrase keeping in touch. And these are templates that you can duplicate weekly as a way of efficiently staying connected to families. Each serves its own purpose. Principal updates are great for overviews of what's happening in the building, important information like attendance procedures or how to know if there's a weather cancellation. Classroom updates are important because they keep parents and caregivers informed about what their children are learning and what the classroom expectations are. And three, I really recommend adding a regular counselor update into the mix, especially when times are tough. It's really important that parents and caregivers can easily access support for their children and for themselves. Now, once your newsletter is delivered, you want multilingual families to translate the newsletter to their home language. So make sure you regularly include directions about how to do that. Once a parent has done this once, Smore will automatically translate the newsletter into their chosen language. A simple screen grab like this one will communicate how to translate the newsletter. You don't need to include instructions with every update, but doing so with some regularity, excuse me, means you're demonstrating to multilingual families that you care about their participation too. Lastly, you need to post your newsletter everywhere that your readers are. And here we have an example of one school's weekly newsletter that's posted on Facebook, on Twitter, and then embedded on the school's website. Now, many schools embed flyers in their newsletters, which is great. They're visual, they're fun, they provide important information, but parents and caregivers must be able to access all the information in an update, which means being mindful about using screenshots or embedding flyers, which are not translatable, which means that some percentage of adults are not going to take in the information that is in those flyers. So what you need to do is make sure that either above or below the flyer, you put a little bit of translatable text that tells readers what is the substance of the flyer. And a final summary slide. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. And glad to take any questions. And if there are none, I will see you next time. I wish you a great rest of your day and week and good communications.